First of all, a huge thank you to the team at Bloomberg for inviting me to this conference. It's safe to say that I am absolutely thrilled to be here. So I'm going to spend the next 2 days listening to some of the brightest minds on stage talk about the things that I think are really top of mind for most of us. Things such as the future of cinema, the future of content, the future of content creators, the boom of audio. How does Spotify fit in all of this? Why is Bill Simmons still bullish on audio podcasts? But also, what does it mean today to be an athlete and to have your brand? And at what point should you start thinking about your brand as a business? And then we're going to look at why all the streaming companies seemingly seem to be going after sports and sports content. And something that's going to be on everyone's mind is AI, the impact of AI on this industry. But what's really interesting is, even though AI seems to be on everyone's minds, very few people seem to fully understand LLMs and generative ML and how we should actually be thinking of it and what we should be actually worried about and focused on. Because it's neither good nor bad. These are just some of the topics that I think are going to be discussed in the next couple of days. And who are these people, you may ask? This is where I can't believe my luck. I'll be hearing from the likes of Byron Allen, Brian Lord, who's the CEO of CAA right now, Neil Mohan, the new CEO of YouTube, as well as Issa Rae, who's a comedian and an actress and a writer and has such a unique position and a point of view with everything that's happening right now with the strikes. I'm also going to hear from Ted Sarandos, CEO at Netflix, and what the future of streaming actually looks like. Bill Simmons from The Ringer, as well as athletes like Mariah Sharapova and Alyssa Thompson. The best thing about these types of conferences is not only getting to listen to the best in class and the people who are leading these companies, but what's also really interesting is to hear people discuss what they've heard on stage, how they're bringing this back to their own companies, how this impacts themselves in their own industries. Safe to say it's going to be a packed agenda, and I cannot be more excited. This is the stuff that I absolutely love. I need other YouTubers to tell me that this gets easier or feels more natural. Because this is difficult.
My team covers everything from film to TV, music, podcasting, video games, sports, social media. The internet has transformed culture in a way that we're still coming to grips with. Streaming has in many ways replaced television or replaced cable as the primary way people watch TV. But the cable networks still generate most of the money, with the exception of Netflix. Most streaming services lose money. Video gaming is bigger than the film business and the music business combined and gets almost none of the coverage. And pretty much all of you could be a content creator if you wanted to. Now, it's not clear how this is all going to result, and so we thought it would be a good idea to have an event to talk about it.
I've been trying to digest all of the big topics and themes that were discussed over the last 2 days at this conference. But before we kick off, there's a note that I want to share that I thought was really interesting and very much tied to this channel. In the first 5 minutes of this conference, we all sat down and they had a sizzle reel. And within the first 10 seconds, under the umbrella of sports, were Formula One cars out on track. And I thought to myself, this is going to be interesting. Are we going to talk about Formula One? But we didn't. And that was what was fascinating. Even though Formula One was chosen to represent the umbrella of sports, it actually wasn't discussed. It came up maybe once or twice, but more as footnotes and maybe an anecdote here and there. And this told me two things. It told me that one, F1 is still very much in its hype cycle globally. Yes, as Europeans, we've been talking about the sport for over 70 years and it's embedded in our culture and a lot of people watch it. It is still new to America and that's okay. The second thing it told me is that when we talk about the intersection of sports and culture and politics and entertainment, we still mostly think about sports like the NFL, basketball or football, and F1 is not quite there yet. The sport, Formula One, still feels very siloed and still feels very impenetrable, and this, for me, this conference highlighted that, which got me really excited about, A, about this channel, and 2, about the opportunities that lie ahead. So the first thing I want to talk about is how context is always key. Scott Havens, the CEO of Bloomberg Media, announced on stage that Bloomberg Media had a new mantra. And that mantra was, context is everything. It's the story behind the story. And it's essentially a much more succinct way of saying what I always say, which is context is important. We can't study topics in silos and everything sits at the intersection of all of these topics. And when we think of culture, entertainment, media, sport, they make up some of the most valuable companies today. Valuable not just in terms of how much money they make, but valuable in how much they come up in every aspect of our day-to-day lives. He also reminded us that today we spend over 12 hours a day consuming media on a variety of different platforms. So this impacts us both personally and also professionally. And then Lucas Shaw, who spearheaded this whole event, reminded us that the lines are getting increasingly blurred between what happens in Silicon Valley and what happens in Hollywood. A nice reminder of this is a company like Netflix once started out as a tech company, but today is essentially a media giant. And as my podcast co-host always says, today, the challenges that the likes of Netflix face are media and entertainment industry challenges, not tech challenges. They need to be solved with media executives and people who understand the entertainment industry. Those questions have shifted, and so have the challenges. Here's another great fact to remember. In 2021, the ad spend from the largest global advertisers came close to $338 billion US. Whereas the ad revenue from Meta, Alphabet, and Amazon combined was more. It came to $355 billion US. Now, as you can imagine, a big part of this conference was sports and entertainment and the next chapter of the sports industry. Neil Moham, the CEO of YouTube, spoke at length about the media landscape and how it was shifting and what was changing, and especially in terms of media consumption. One of the things that he said that I thought was really interesting is the expectations of the younger generation of consumers is that everything is on the same platform. Whether you're looking for a 15-second video, a 15-minute video, or a 15-hour video. And so that is what YouTube is trying to think of right now. Quibi also gets brought up quite a lot at these conferences. Remember Quibi? But what was interesting about Quibi is there are two main reasons why it failed, but it was also two incredible great lessons. Number one is this idea that short-form videos or videos that are made to be consumed on the go and mobile don't automatically mean bad quality and not premium. Secondly, don't underestimate how much people love to share great content. Word of mouth is still the number one way people tell friends and families above any other form of marketing about something that they love, something that they've purchased, or something that they've been to. Quibi didn't allow for that. You couldn't screenshot anything, which meant that Quibi missed out on the potential virality of their shows, something that TikTok has absolutely tapped into recently. Then we heard from Byron Allen, and he said something that has stuck with me for the last couple of days. He said that we all need to own our own media assets and don't ever let anyone else represent you. Now, you obviously in this sentence can mean the individual person, but it can also mean the demographic of people that you represent. Back in 2020, when I started creating Formula One content on TikTok, I was filling in a void and a gap, and there was a massive opportunity there to bring the people that might have discovered Formula One via Drive to Survive, but weren't quite ready to sit down and enjoy the races, mostly because there was a gap of knowledge. And I wanted to hear from people who looked like me and sounded like me and approached content in the way that I would approach it. And this is the thing that I've said for many years now. The reason we are seeing so many young female content creators, but also content creators from all diverse different backgrounds that don't look like the presenters and the commentators that we have had in the sport for 20 plus years is A, the barrier to entry has been lowered. It is easier than ever to pull up a camera and start recording and share about something that you want to talk about. But it's also because there was a massive opportunity and there was a massive gap that needed to be filled. These young female content creators didn't just discover the sport. A lot of them had just been quiet and passive followers of the sport for many years because they didn't feel like they belonged. And all of a sudden, TikTok came and the creator economy popped up and boomed. And then that opportunity became a reality. Then we got the big question. How long is it going to take for Netflix to start bidding on live sports? But let's not forget one thing. Netflix absolutely did bid on Formula One, except that it's ESPN that won it. Now, what we're seeing with streaming platforms is there seems to be two different ways of approaching it. There seems to be the Netflix way, which is documentaries and docuseries, Full Swing, Breakpoint, Drive to Survive, Beckham most recently. And then you've got the route that Amazon and Apple seem to be taking, which is actually bidding on live sports. And there's a whole conversation about actually who tunes in to watch sports documentaries, because the fandoms really love it. But it's a very small cohort of people still that consume this type of media. But one thing is for sure, streaming and sports are definitely going in hand right now. What was also interesting is Bill Simmons had a lot to say about the quality of sports docuseries, saying that most of them, the quality isn't just great. He did highlight the Beckham documentary as the best possible version and outcome of what a docuseries could look like, and he also highlighted The Last Dance. And by the way, the reason why he highlighted Beckham and The Last Dance is he said that mix and that intersection of culture and sports is a winning duo and a winning mix, which I have to say he's spot on there. Which brings me back to that point at the start of the video is F1 is still not ingrained in culture quite the way other sports are, which might be a reason why those documentaries don't appeal to a broader group of people. Now, during the conversations with Alyssa Thompson and Maria Sharapova, the idea of athletes as brand ambassadors, as owners of their own brands, but also athletes building media empires kept coming up. More importantly, the business rationale for women's sports kept coming up. and the very obvious momentum that we are in right now and that women's sport is feeling and experiencing right now, which was incredibly exciting to hear about. And then this concept that I have been loving recently, which is this move away from celebrity endorsements to celebrity and athlete-led brands and media empires. It's not an or situation, but rather it's a shift. Rather it's adding to the already existing pies of different ways that athletes can get involved and make more money off the court. What was really interesting was to hear from Maria Sharapova talk about how back in 2004, when she was interested in the business angle and the business side of her industry, it was looked down upon, it was frowned upon, it wasn't very well accepted. And right now is the most incredible time to be talking about this shift to celebrity and content creator or athlete-led brands. We are in a moment right now, in a moment where Angela Arendt recently just joined Kim Kardashian's fund. Pat McAfee recently joined ESPN, where they bought his digital show that used to live just on YouTube. Alex Cooper is creating a new talent network. Emma Chamberlain raised more money for Chamberlain Coffee. Athletes like Daniel Ricciardo launching Enchanté, but also the likes of Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton. We're in a moment right now where athletes are launching their own brands and their own media companies. And most recently, we also have Travis Kelce, who has a podcast, and this is definitely the start of him building his own media empire. Another big moment during this conference was talking about what it takes to create global but even national cultural moments. Similarly to what we've seen with Taylor Swift's concert tour, with Beyonce's concert tour, with the Travis Kelce and Taylor moment. Take Taylor out of the equation, but also what, for just a second, but also what we saw with Barbenheimer, so the Barbie movie, and Oppenheimer. Like, what differentiates these moments, whether it's concerts or movies or live events or sporting events, and what pulls them out of those siloed industries in which they live and make them a cultural moment? Donna Langley, who is both the chair but also the CCO at NBC Universal, spoke at length about what makes cultural moments. She reminded us that the marketing campaigns and the amount of money and revenue that you pour into these marketing campaigns have a huge role in these cultural moments. They are somewhat fabricated. This fabrication is tied to this understanding of the power of word of mouth. Remember Quibi? And this is where she talks about the importance of leaning into the communities and the fandoms and understanding these moments. She talked about this because Peacock only represents 1% of the global streaming business. Essentially what she's talking about is how you create and draw in an audience for them to stick with you throughout these big moments. Which I thought was interesting at a moment where Netflix has announced that they are going to be building basically IRL moments tied to some of their most successful TV shows and movies. But also this reminded me of the presentation I gave to Sky Sports this year, which is if you want to know where the future of this business is going, if you want to know where the future of F1 and the future of sports is going, just take a look at what young female fandoms are doing. Look at how they're engaging with your content and look at how they're interacting with it. Because they are the future of the sport, but they're also writing this next chapter of the industry. And the perfect example that we can give of this is friendship bracelets that are now absolutely everywhere in Formula One. And finally, something that I found surprising, mostly because I'm not in the entertainment business, was how transparency and the show ratings kept coming up, and specifically the Nielsen reports. Let me explain. I think this kept coming up mostly because of all the strikes that we've just experienced and how important show ratings are to the people writing the shows and the actors in the shows and the producers building the shows, and also just the lack of transparency that there is around this industry currently right now. And it is true that the likes of Netflix don't often tell you, and they're not very obvious about which shows are doing well. Yes, they have the top 10, but that isn't always baked into the actual numbers. And we do have streaming data, but it's far from perfect. But one thing that we do know is we are able to tell if a show is a hit, and thus if we know if a show is a hit, we know which shows aren't actually a hit as well. And by the way, this lack of transparency is why we end up with absolute insane headlines such as Drive to Survive made Formula One in America, Formula One revives in America because of Drive to Survive, which, by the way, I'm not saying Drive to Survive didn't help with the growth of Formula One in America, but it sure as hell wasn't the only reason, and we keep forgetting the perfect storm that happened for all of this to be able to be true. Because Drive to Survive absolutely played a role, but it isn't the full story, and we love oversimplifying things for a variety of different reasons. But quick anecdote, in 2022, last year, the latest season of Drive to Survive failed to make the charts altogether. And in 2021, they were in the top 10 for barely a week and didn't make it for the second week. They aren't that popular. They are popular only with a small group of people. I actually think that next week's discussion has to be the myth around the rise and now the somewhat downfall of Formula One. And I think that's going to be an incredible topic for us to talk about. So let's put a pin in that and we'll return next week with that topic. Thanks for sticking around if you made it this far. I hope you enjoyed it. This is something a little bit new and a little bit different. And if you've got any questions ahead of next week's video, please drop them in the comment section and I'll make sure to look at them before next week.